Welcome to the Deep Dive. We sift through stacks of expert advice so you don't have to, bringing you the key insights. Today, we're tackling something absolutely vital for anyone starting a company or on an early team, building that initial founding team. Think of it as the blueprint for your first hires. Our goal here is to pull out the really critical stuff from sources like first-round review, looking at what founders and leaders learned, often the hard way, during that intense make-or-break beginning phase.
Exactly. And, when you're just starting, those first hires feel huge. Who do you pick? Experience,
Yeah.
potential. What roles even come first? It's definitely not just about filling seats. We're talking strategic choices. These early folks, they really set the company's culture, the whole vibe, and lay down the tracks for growth. Seriously, those first few hires are critical. So we'll dig into what to look for, maybe who to prioritize, and, well, how to even approach hiring when everything's still kind of up in the air.
Okay, so let's jump right into this core idea. Hiring early on isn't just transactional, it's foundational. It shapes the company's DNA. The sources are really clear on this, saying something like, the strength of the founding team is the single most important factor in whether a business sinks or swims early on. That's pretty stark.
Yeah, it really is, yeah. And it's interesting how they talk about how that happens. Early employees, they set the implicit norms, the unwritten rules. But it's more than just vibes.
Yeah.
Kevin Fishner from HashiCorp makes a great point. He says, building actual systems early sets the explicit norms. Things like, how do we make decisions? How do we run meetings? Set goals. Getting those systems down when you're small is way easier than trying to bolt them on later when you're bigger. It's like building the scaffolding as you go.
Right. So it's both the culture and the process being built simultaneously. And it sounds like a lot of startups stumble here, like hiring too senior, too fast. I saw that quote from Stripe's Gene DeWitt Grocer. Don't hire the big name too early. Get people who want to roll their sleeves up. Simple, but powerful.
Totally. It's about that willingness to dig in. James Everingham also touched on this, saying, trying to get ahead of hiring in a startup often backfires because things change so fast.
Yeah.
You end up with the wrong people or the wrong structure. Being resource constrained actually forces creativity and ruthless prioritizing. You have to focus.
Which means you need super adaptable people. I loved that point from Erica Gallus-Alioto at Grammarly, saying successful early folks often changed roles 5 or more times because they just went where they were needed. They weren't just specialists. They sound like those barrels the sources mention, people who can run with an idea, bring others along, just make things happen.
Yes, that barrel concept fits perfectly with the idea of a founder's mentality. That's key for early hires. Zainab Gadiali, who is at Airbnb and Facebook, she really emphasizes hunger as non-negotiable early on. And she doesn't just mean ambition. It's a deep desire to learn, to figure out the problem, to actively look for challenges, not just wait for tasks. Real proactivity.
Okay, that makes sense. But hunger, how do you actually spot that in an interview? Is there a trick question?
Maybe not a magic bullet, but Gadiali offers some good starting points. She suggests asking things like, are you willing to learn more about this problem? Simple, right? Or what do you geek out about? That gets at passion. And when was the last time you had to learn something new? These questions help reveal curiosity, drive, that willingness to jump into something unfamiliar. You're looking for problem solvers at heart.
I like that. It feels less about ticking boxes and more about understanding their mindset. And it ties into that idea of ownership, too.
Absolutely. John Zanzarella from Performline puts it so well. Think of it as your own business. If there is trash to empty, empty it. It's that humility, that willingness to do whatever needs doing because you care about the outcome. That's the founder mentality. The advice is basically, for maybe your first 40 hires, look for this relentlessly. And even challenge candidates, almost try to talk them out of joining. See if they really understand the gritty reality and still want in. You want people who choose it consciously.
Okay, so founder mentality, hunger, adaptability. This leads naturally to that idea of prioritizing generalists over specialists, right? Especially early on, particularly for non-engineering roles. You need adaptable business types who can jump between product, ops, maybe even data. The sources specifically say specialized engineers are usually not needed initially. Coinbase was mentioned as an example of keeping the engineering team lean early. You just don't need that deep specialization yet.
Right. The needs are too fluid. And this connects to how you communicate during hiring. How honest should you be? The advice is, be brutally honest. Seriously, it lets candidates truly self-select. Are they really up for the chaos and uncertainty? Adam Grant's question is great. What's something that would only happen here but wouldn't at other organizations? Or Christina Cordova's, what area of the business would you say this company is behind on, given its stage? These force a realistic conversation. You're checking if they see the challenges and still want to be part of solving them.
Okay, so we have this picture of the type of person: adaptable, hungry, owner mindset, generalist. Let's shift to specific roles. Where do you actually start putting people? What about product? The sources say that early on, pre-product market fit, that PMF stage where things really click, product management is almost like project management. Is that right?
That's a really key distinction, yes. Before PMF, the founders are the product vision. They own finding that fit. So an early product hire. Their job is mostly to accelerate the founder's vision and focus on predictable execution. They help build what the founder sees. And the warning is pretty clear. Hiring a PM too early, before PMF, can be a mistake. It's like hiring a big sales team before you know people actually want what you're selling. It's only later, during hypergrowth, that PM becomes truly strategic, guiding things beyond that initial founder vision.
Oh, that makes sense. Don't hire the strategist before you have a strategy that's proven. What about design? What's the crucial role for a founding designer?
For the first designer, the absolute number one goal, according to the sources, is establishing design as a critical business function. It's about fighting for that seat at the table, proving design's value beyond just making things look nice. It's strategic from day one.
So how do they do that? What qualities do they need?
They absolutely need to be generalists. They have to be transparent, think about scale even when things are tiny, and crucially, work quickly, iterate fast. They're not just pushing pixels. They're thinking user experience, business impact, future growth. Think about Caitlin Kalinowski's work on the Mac Pro at Apple. It's the kind of complex balancing act designers navigate. They're building the design culture, not just the product look.
Interesting. Now, there was one piece of advice that really stood out to me, kind of counterintuitive. Investing in a customer success team, CS, before a sales team. Why on earth would you do that first?
It sounds backwards, but it's actually quite smart, especially early on. CS does a few critical things. One, they make sure your first customers are actually getting value. That drives retention. Two, they gather incredible feedback vital for iterating and finding PMF. As the sources put it, your product needs to adapt. CS will often identify those emerging needs, and great retention is the path to great expansion. Think about Zola's CEO, Shanlin Ma, using feedback from NPS detractors, the unhappy customers, to directly improve the product. That's gold. Plus, getting customers involved as advisors, maybe even hires, super valuable. So for many companies, especially those selling to mid-market or SMBs, getting that customer value piece right first makes selling much easier later.
Okay, I see the logic now. Nail the value and feedback loop before you try to scale sales. So zooming out again, all these early hires, these role choices, what's the lasting impact? We talked about implicit norms.
Right, and the explicit systems.
Yeah.
Kevin Fisher's point again, building those decision-making processes, meeting structures early on is key for scaling without breaking. It's about intentionally designing how your company operates.
And part of that design seems to be about encouraging disagreement.
Healthy conflict, yeah. Jack Altman's point is important here. You don't want a kumbaya culture where everyone just nods along. You want people comfortable enough to disagree, to challenge ideas. That leads to better decisions, avoids groupthink. When you see healthy debate starting, lean into it.
That requires a lot of trust, though, especially, I imagine, between co-founders. The sources mention that the co-founder relationship is, well, entirely within their control, but failure there is common. Building that trust requires vulnerability.
Absolutely. It starts at the top and permeates outwards. And this connects to something David Cancel talks about, the internal art of storytelling. He says the CEO's job is like being an editor, pushing for higher standards, yes, but also making sure everyone understands the why. Why are we doing this? That shared story keeps the early team aligned, motivated, especially when things get tough. Mike Krieger noted this for Instagram's early engineers, moving from individual work to a real team identity driven by that shared purpose.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, if you're out there building your first team, the core message seems to be think beyond the job description. It's less about checklists, more about strategic foresight. Look for those adaptable, hungry generalists, people with that founder smark. Prioritize roles that directly touch customer value and product iteration early on. These first hires, they're arguably the most critical investment you'll make. They define who you become.
Exactly. And it may be a final thought to leave you with. You think you're hiring for today's problem, that immediate gap.
Yeah.
But every single person you bring on in those early days is a vote cast for your company's future. Its culture, its capabilities, its very soul. So how deeply are you really looking, not just at what they can do, but who they are, how they think, and how they will fundamentally shape what you're building together? That's the question.